and welcome back to Mother Tongue, your eyes, ears, and finger on the pulse for all parents around the world. Let's get going, shall we?
We are so incredibly excited to welcome Jillian Greaves to Mother Tongue. Jillian, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I mean, we were just talking about where Jillian is right now and where we are and the time zones and the difference, and you've just woken up and, well, not quite, but you're about to have your lunch. I'm about to have my dinner.
Yeah.
Still not quite sure what I'm going to devour tonight, but we're talking a lot about nutrition today.
Perfect
I feel like it's
timing,
all very
right?
topical, very topical. But before we get into all the good stuff today, can you just tell our lovely listeners a little bit about yourself?
Of course. So my name is Jillian Greaves. I'm an integrative functional dietitian and women's health specialist. And for anyone that's not familiar, essentially what I do, what me and my team does, is we really support women with identifying and addressing the root causes of their hormone and digestive health symptoms naturally. So we utilize advanced lab testing, supportive nutrition strategies, lifestyle strategies, targeted supplements to really support the body and ideally bring the body back to balance and ultimately really to get women back in the driver's seat of their health, which is the goal. So that's kind of my spiel in terms of, who I am, what we do. And we specifically work with a lot of women that are struggling with various hormone related symptoms, gut symptoms, a lot of women who are trying to get pregnant, who are actively pregnant, and often in the postpartum period where we're working to support the body with recalibrating.
I mean, I bet you're a very, very popular woman, because I feel like now, especially in this day and age, I don't know if this has always been a thing and people just didn't talk about it before, but I think now, especially, the amount of people who I speak to who have gut issues, I mean, it's like every person, pretty much.
I know.
And I've experienced a barrel load of them in the last, I would say, 20 years of my life. And it's never ending. And I just feel like pregnancy and then that kind of postpartum depletion, it just strips you of everything.
100%.
I will come into my tale shortly, but it's not that niche, but it is quite a niche career to get into. I mean, was there something that happened in your own life that led you down this garden path, or was there something particular that kind of sparked your interest?
Yes. So, I found that a lot of practitioners in the holistic functional, health space often have their own journey or went through their own struggles, which was definitely the case for me. To keep a very long story short, I started out my career in nutrition in terms of, I had an undergraduate degree in nutrition. I was getting my master's degree in nutrition, was going on to become a registered dietitian. And I started experiencing a lot of health symptoms. So I was experiencing, bloating, issues with bowel movements. My hair was thinning. I was anxious. I was experiencing really gnarly eczema, and itchy skin rashes, acne. And I, sought out support from my conventional provider who essentially, ran some basic labs, told me I was the picture of health, and, there was nothing that could be done. At the time, I had also been on hormonal birth control for about a decade or a little over a decade, and had never really looked into birth control or, kind of really understood how it was working in my body. And I was put on hormonal birth control at a young age for miserable periods and just sort of, rode the wave and continued on the birth control, since then. So ultimately, I was experiencing all of these symptoms and was really not willing to accept that there were no answers, that my body was just rebelling against me for no reason. But I was kind of tossed around from one provider to the next and told, okay, take this steroid cream for the eczema, take this medication for that symptom. And it was just kind of Band-Aid solution after Band-Aid solution. And I always like to preface this by saying I am by no means anti-medication. And if that's a tool that's supportive for someone, I am all in favor of that and respect their autonomy to make those decisions that feel great for them. But for me personally, it felt like I was just, no one was looking deeper or asking the question why. And that's what really drove me to find the functional nutrition, functional medicine world. And I started to really immerse myself in, researching and understanding female physiology, which was not part of my, conventional training at all. And really started to immerse myself in the world of functional medicine. And I was able to eventually find solutions. So I was able to understand why these symptoms were happening in my body. And I was able to support these imbalances and eventually eliminate these symptoms naturally. And I will be very honest about the fact that it took me a lot longer than it should have, because I was hacking it together, trying this, trying that, learning a lot, as I went along. And at the end of the day, I realized after all was said and done, talking to friends, talking to, family, colleagues, there's a lot of women out there struggling, a lot of women that are struggling with symptoms that are being gaslit when they're looking for support. They're being, kind of told that medications are their only option, and no one is asking the question why. And so I found that through my own experience and, talking with women working in conventional healthcare, that women's health dynamics are just so undersupported, and women are almost forced to normalize living with these disruptive symptoms, and are almost forced to accept that, oh, this is just part of being a woman, or this is just part of being postpartum and feeling fatigued and bloated all the time. And I strongly disagree, and I feel really passionately about the fact that women really deserve better, and we deserve to feel healthy and vibrant. And if we're not feeling that way, we deserve answers and support with really addressing those things holistically.
It's so true. And I mean, postpartum, it's just every time, this is my third postpartum period, and every single time I'm like, I thought it would be better. Like, I just thought it would be easier. And there have been lots of things about this time that I've been kinder to myself about. And because of that, it has been better in some ways. But, I've been on 3 rounds of antibiotics in the last 4 months. I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah.
And I just keep getting knocked down. My immune system is shot to crap. Everything, silly things, like I keep getting like infections in my ears. I had an infection in my nail. I got influenza. The list just goes on and on and on. And on top of that, the hormone imbalance brings on things like mum guilt and anxiety and all these other things. And I'm just, as much as I really try to eat well, you're just down. You're on your knees and sleep deprived, and it's wild. Can you just talk to us a bit about what happens in this postpartum period and why we become so depleted and so deficient?
Yeah, I love this question. It is not talked about enough. And something I want to share with women is that, pregnancy, postpartum, and lactation, for anyone that's breastfeeding, these are considered the most nutritionally expensive periods of time throughout, a woman's life cycle. And interestingly, the postpartum period, especially that acute postpartum period in the first few months postpartum, nutrient needs are actually significantly higher than they are in pregnancy. So there's a decent amount of support for women in pregnancy in terms of, okay, how are we supporting our body with nutrition? Are we taking a good quality prenatal? Let's support mom, let's support baby. But when it comes to postpartum, I find that women are sort of, just kind of dismissed, or it's like, hey, have your 2-week and your 6-week check-in, everything looks good, you're on your way. But postpartum healing absolutely does not stop at 6 weeks. And, more importantly, this postpartum period there's a tremendous opportunity to be able to support the body with more optimal recovery, repair, repletion, because we are very depleted after pregnancy, after birth, and going into that, early postpartum phase. So our nutrient needs are really high. Our energy needs are really high. We've just experienced the single largest hormone drop that we will ever experience in our lifetime. Our thyroid is going through a lot of changes. Our digestion and gut health are going through a lot of changes. The body is trying to support, all of this healing. And we also have a little human that we're taking care of. Our sleep is disrupted. All of this combined makes this such a critical period of time to support women, not only for how they feel in an immediate sense, but also to support, long-term health outcomes and really the trajectory of women's health long-term.
It's absolutely crazy. I mean, there's so much change. And I think, for one, like hormones has been the biggest one for me. I feel like that would be wildly true, but I feel like normally I'm quite a level person, but I feel like during postpartum my hormones are all over the place, and my mind, the anxiety and the adrenaline that I feel is just absolutely crazy. And I know that the liver plays a real big part in hormone metabolism. What things can we do to support our liver to help kind of get that balance back within our hormones?
Yeah, great question. And, to your point, the liver plays a really big role with just breaking down and processing hormones. So making sure they're broken down safely, effectively, and eliminated from the body. Our liver is also going to be responsible for, supporting thyroid hormone conversion, for breaking down, toxins and different things in our environment that we're exposed to. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that liver detoxification, like if I don't know about you, but a lot of our clients, when they hear the word like detoxification, they think about like a juice cleanse or, some restrictive, dietary approach. But ultimately, detoxification and the breakdown and metabolism of hormones in the liver is a very energy and nutrient intensive process. So we need to provide the body with the raw materials that it needs to be able to kind of, perform these functions properly. And first and foremost, I always recommend that women start with the foundations or the basics before we get more zoomed in. Otherwise, we might miss the forest for the trees. So what I mean by that is we got to make sure we're eating enough, right? We have to take in enough energy from food every single day. And, that's important not only for liver health, but just this recovery, repair, repletion, and making sure the body has enough resources to support healing. But to take it back to supporting liver detoxification and hormone metabolism, some of the key things I think about outside of, eating enough are protein intake. So protein, particularly good quality animal proteins, are going to provide a lot of bioavailable or absorbable B vitamins and amino acids that are needed to support breaking down and processing hormones in the liver. I also think about foods like cruciferous vegetables, which are really rich in compounds that help to support liver detoxification. So that's going to be, broccoli and Brussels sprouts, cabbage, bok choy, arugula. I also think about general just antioxidant intake in terms of, supporting certain phases of liver detox, choline, which is predominantly going to be found in things like eggs, magnesium, which is a really key mineral. So these are all some key kind of foods and nutrients to think about. For some, additional support, we could think about bringing in things like, dandelion root tea or milk thistle that help to support, the liver. But we always have to remember that if we're not eating enough, taking enough calories from food, our protein intake is low, getting micro-focused on like the dandelion root is only going to do so much.
What about supplementing? I mean, you mentioned that earlier on, that obviously we supplement a lot during pregnancy, but no one really ever talks about postpartum supplements. And I remember I asked a couple of my friends, I was like, what can I take? And it was kind of like met with deaf ears. Like there was nothing that anyone could really recommend. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, if I had to choose just a couple things, one, I would say stay on a high quality prenatal for a year postpartum. That additional support is so key for supporting those increased nutrient needs. And it also serves as a little bit of like a safety blanket, because no one's diet is perfect. We're not expecting perfection here, right? Yeah. And, you know, taking a good quality prenatal can be really helpful for, you know, repletion throughout postpartum. The other couple things I would say are really key would be a good quality fish oil or cod liver oil supplement. So bringing in some of those anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids, or DHA, and EPA specifically. These omega-3 fatty acids are essential fatty acids, meaning we have to obtain them through food. We can't like produce them in the body. And our omega-3 fatty acid needs really increase postpartum based on the fact that these are needed to support things like wound healing, you know, tissue repair, but they're also really, really key for like brain health, mood, mental health, which, you know, is obviously incredibly important postpartum. The other thing that I would say would be a really key kind of piece of a supplement plan postpartum would be mineral support. So minerals being our kind of primary macro minerals being magnesium, sodium, and potassium. So these minerals are needed to support virtually every process, every enzymatic reaction in the body. And we lose about 10% of our minerals during pregnancy. So our minerals are very depleted postpartum. And then other things that deplete our minerals are things like stress. So stress is going to burn through our mineral stores and really increase those mineral needs. And it's just a little bit harder to get adequate minerals from food these days, just based on, you know, soil quality and things like that. Supplementing with sodium, magnesium, and potassium, I would say, is often the biggest game changer for women and how they feel postpartum.
Writing this down.
Yeah. So typically I recommend supplementing with a standalone magnesium supplement. Magnesium glycinate is a really nice absorbable form of magnesium. That's, you know, really affordable, readily accessible. And typically I'll recommend, you know, starting with like, you know, 400 milligrams of magnesium glycinate in the evening. This is something that really, really helps in particular with mood, sleep, and stress resilience. So feeling like we can, you know, adapt and respond a little bit better to stress. Yeah. With sodium and potassium, these are things I'll typically recommend supplementing with in, you know, a mineral beverage or like an electrolyte beverage. Yeah. So, you know, getting a product that has a good amount of sodium and potassium and just throwing that into your water bottle a couple times a day. Again, women typically notice really big differences with energy, with mood, and with that stress resilience. And then these minerals are also needed to support a lot of other things in the body, the liver detoxification, you know, the adrenal health, the thyroid function. So those would be kind of the key supplements I would say most any woman can benefit from that make a big difference postpartum.
So during postpartum as well, you mentioned that inflammatory shift, like there's a massive inflammatory shift, and omega-3s can be really, really helpful. Is there anything else that can help reduce the inflammatory and kind of bring everything back together and help support the gut?
Yeah, great question. In terms of, supporting the gut, supporting the inflammation, you know, for anyone that's not familiar, gut health and inflammation kind of go hand in hand, where, you know, about 70 to 80% of immune cells are found within the lining of the gut. So most of our immune system resides within the gut. So the health of the gut plays a big role with kind of regulating inflammation in the body. But from a postpartum recovery perspective, you know, again, we're doing a lot of wound repair, tissue repair that requires, you know, a lot of support, you know, externally from, you know, nutrition essentially. So amping up omega-3 fatty acid intake, supplements are great, but also bringing in more fatty fish, can be an awesome way to support that. And generally just increasing your intake of antioxidant rich foods. So that's going to be like your bright, colorful fruits and veggies, you know, your herbs and spices, fermented foods are great. Generally, postpartum, especially in the first couple months postpartum, I recommend that women, if they're able to, kind of focus on predominantly cooked foods versus lots of raw foods. So with birth, the digestive system kind of goes to sleep. And I think a lot of women postpartum can relate to this in terms of struggling with constipation or bloating. And oftentimes women want to, eat all these, great nutritious foods and all the veggies, but these are hard to break down and they require a lot of work from our digestive system. So even just focusing on, the cooked vegetables, so roasted, sauteed, steamed, however you like it, can be a way to bring in those antioxidants in a way that we can actually, absorb those nutrients easily and not kind of aggravate our digestion. In terms of supporting gut health as a whole, which is kind of linked to this anti-inflammatory conversation, I like to focus on the basics here too. Sometimes it's easy to kind of get caught up in some of the fun, trendy things, which can always be great. But on a basic level, again, let's make sure we're eating enough, that we're eating consistently throughout the day. If meal timing is really erratic and all over the place, this is going to disrupt our digestion, and kind of the rhythmic digestion that we're hoping to achieve. I also really recommend focusing on, fiber intake. So that's going to be predominantly from our plant foods, a lot of the ones that I mentioned in terms of foods that are rich in antioxidants. So, cooked veggies, fruits, legumes, grains. These can be really great for supporting and feeding healthy gut bacteria, and in turn supporting a healthy inflammatory response.
Fabulous. Lots of things to be adding to my shopping list this week. And then what about thyroid dysfunction? Because I know this is also very common. I've had a hormone imbalance on and off, thyroid imbalance on and off for years and years and years. And I've never really understood how I could support my thyroid from a nutritional standpoint. So could you give any advice to that?
Yeah, and I feel like a little bit of a broken record here with, focus on the foundations first, but ultimately that is where I would start. The thyroid goes through a lot of changes. There's a lot of demands on the thyroid during pregnancy and also postpartum. And this is often where we see women develop thyroid issues is in pregnancy, but also in this postpartum period. And there's a lot that we can do to really support healthy thyroid function. So on a basic level, would definitely make sure that we're, eating consistent meals and snacks throughout the day, ideally like every 3-4 hours throughout the day, making sure that we're really taking in enough energy from food. I think something that's not talked about enough is the fact that, under eating, whether it be intentional or unintentional, it's a significant stressor on the body.
Yeah.
And our thyroid is a gland that is kind of always scanning our environment and looking to protect us. So if our thyroid senses that energy is scarce, it is going to adapt and compensate to try to conserve resources. So it will become more sluggish. It will slow down when, energy and resources are scarce for any prolonged period of time. So really making sure we're supporting those foundations with, consistent balanced meals, eating enough is super important. To get a little bit more micro with strategies for supporting the thyroid, our minerals that I already mentioned are super important for supporting the thyroid. Another really key nutrient that doesn't get enough attention in pregnancy and postpartum is iodine. So iodine, essentially thyroid hormone is built from iodine, and we do need adequate iodine to be able to support thyroid hormone production and thyroid hormone conversion. If we're taking a good quality prenatal, ideally there's going to be some good iodine in there. But we can also bring in, iodine in our diet. So that's iodine's predominantly going to come from foods like shellfish, good quality dairy products, and also a big way that I like to recommend clients bring iodine in a little more easily into their diet is considering incorporating like sea veggies into their diet. And there's these great seasonings. I don't know if you've ever heard of these, like kelp flakes or dulce flakes. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that.
Yeah.
But essentially it's a little seasoning that, you can keep on hand and sprinkle on pretty much anything. And that's a great way to just boost iodine intake. So
I want to move on to cravings next, because I feel like, I know myself. In fact, I've been like this since I fell pregnant, to be honest. I'm just craving sugar all the time, and sugar and caffeine. I feel like sugar and caffeine are like my two pick-me-ups at the moment. I'm on 3 cups of coffee a day, which is dreadful, I know, because it also, all it does is increase my anxiety, which stresses me out, that I feel so like this. And I always need to pick me up. After every single meal, I'm like reaching for the sugar. And I feel like I'm not alone in this. How can we stabilize this? How can we try and ease ourselves out of this kind of neurotic state?
Yes, I love this question. And I think there's usually kind of two pieces to the puzzle, I find, when it comes to cravings and sugar cravings in particular. The first kind of factor here being that sometimes sugar cravings are actually physiological drivers. So this is a way that our body might be communicating with us. And very often we see women experiencing sugar cravings in relation to blood sugar instability, and or these kind of go hand in hand, not eating enough. But often blood sugar instability, if we're kind of riding a blood sugar roller coaster throughout the day, and we're experiencing kind of big spikes and crashes in blood sugar, when blood sugar is low or crashes, the body sees sugar and carbohydrate foods as a source of quick energy. So that's where we'll often see those sugar cravings kind of manifest. So if someone's experiencing sugar cravings, I always like to look at their dietary pattern as a whole and consider have we eaten enough today, and then getting a little bit more micro and considering are we eating consistently enough, are we eating enough at meals, are we getting enough protein, which is a really important blood sugar stabilizing macronutrient. So if we're going like really long stretches of time without eating, so I mentioned physiologically our bodies really work well when we get food or fuel about every 3-4 hours throughout the day. If we're going 5-6 hours between meals, I'm not surprised that we're, experiencing a lot of sugar cravings. If our meals are skimpy or we don't have enough protein, again, we're going to digest those meals really rapidly. So we end up crashing, early and then craving that sugar. So I'd kind of reflect on the day and see if there are opportunities to kind of bring in more nourishment, more stability for the body. Something that it sounds so simple, but can make a really big difference is amp up breakfast. Make breakfast your biggest meal of the day. Have a really well-rounded, protein-rich breakfast within an hour or two after waking. And that can really anchor the body and keep blood sugar stable throughout the day. Inevitably, if women are skipping breakfast or delaying breakfast, or breakfast is really skimpy, we almost always see sugar cravings later in the day. So, so those are some things to think about there. The other kind of part of this is, all right, if we're, eating really well, blood sugar's super stable, we're eating enough, but we're, kind of still craving sugar after meals. Sometimes I think about the emotional component of that in terms of, are we grabbing for sugar because it's serving a different purpose in terms of, maybe we're stressed or bored or overwhelmed. And, I always like to normalize the fact that there's nothing wrong with enjoying something sweet in my mind. And that can be a part of a healthy dietary pattern. But if we feel like, we're always grabbing for something sweet, after every meal, and that's not feeling great for us, maybe we can consider other tools or other rituals that, might feel really supportive in those moments. Maybe it's making like a really, tasty cup of tea that can sort of have a little sweetness to it. Maybe we actually need to like get outside and go for a walk or, call a friend. But at the end of the day, I think, if we want to enjoy something sweet, I really encourage women to, eat it, enjoy it, eat it mindfully, and move on. Don't stress about it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do need to curb mine slightly. I mean, I feel like Easter hasn't been on my side, but it's fine.
Holidays are hard.
I know, they're all so hard. I feel like I've just rolled from Christmas to Easter though, which is quite terrifying, throwing Valentine's Day in the middle. So I know that obviously sleep deprivation and stress can also really affect our metabolism, and that's hard because I feel like, when you get to this postpartum period, you're already kind of feeling disconnected from your body. Everything's a bit flabby and wiggles a bit too much, and it's a lot to take on all at the same time with everything else that's going on. And then you throw in sleep deprivation and stress, which is inevitable in the newborn phase, and your metabolism just is shot to shit, let's be honest. What can we do to try and migrate these effects and just get everything back on track? I mean, is there a magic wand? Please tell me.
I wish I could say there's a magic wand. And so to clarify here too, so the question is kind of from a metabolism, like body composition perspective in terms of how to support things. Yeah. Because you're spot on. There's a lot of variables that are not in our control postpartum. And I don't know if I had shared this, but I just had my first. He's like 6.5 months. So this is all fresh on the mind for me as well. Yeah. But ultimately, what I would recommend here is, first and foremost, I think doing your best to kind of make peace with and let go of the things that are not in your control right now, and to really focus on the things that are in your control, often which might not seem huge, but can make a huge difference with supporting our metabolism and, body composition postpartum and throughout that recovery period. So for example, just regulating the blood sugar, focusing on those food foundations that I've mentioned and supporting the body really well. One of the biggest mistakes I think I see women make postpartum is trying to diet in terms of trying to restrict calories or, kind of go on some type of restrictive plan. The postpartum period is not a time for that. And although that could lead to some shifts with weight in an immediate sense, 100% of the time that typically ends up backfiring because, again, it's a time where the body needs ample nourishment. And when it's not getting that, again, our thyroid is going to adapt. Our metabolism is going to become more sluggish, and it can create more issues and roadblocks down the line. So I think the best way to be able to support, metabolism and thyroid and body composition shifts over time is to focus on those really supportive foundations, making sure we're doing all those key things that I mentioned. And then that's also where things like, mineral support can be really helpful. Okay, our sleep is disrupted. We have more stress on our body. But if we can replete minerals and, again, support the thyroid, support that metabolic function, support balancing our stress hormones, this can really help to tip the scale with keeping things feeling more balanced and like we're, kind of progressing at a pace that feels better, postpartum.
Yeah.
So I think really being able to kind of focus on food foundations, mineral support. And I think if we can allow ourselves, some grace and flexibility and to move more slowly through those early postpartum months, that's typically where things come together for women a lot better, as we get farther along postpartum versus kind of trying to, fight against ourselves early on or getting too restrictive, which again, just typically backfires.
And when we talk about this postpartum period, I mean, how long would you say does the postpartum period last? I know lots of people have different answers to this question, but in your opinion, what would you say?
Yeah, so definitely there's varying opinions here. I really treat the postpartum period like for a full year after giving birth. And there's definitely evidence to argue that, healing goes well even beyond that. And there's certainly different phases to the postpartum period. And I think anyone that has had a baby has probably experienced that in terms of like, oh, I feel a little different at this point. Like, oh, I feel like I've, kind of past another threshold at this point. But I really treat the first year, with clients postpartum as a key time frame to support recovery in the body, and to support those long-term outcomes.
Okay. Before we start to wrap up today, I just had one question about milk supply. Now, obviously, breastfeeding is another massively nutrient depleting time of a woman's life, and a lot of women struggle with low milk supply. Are there any evidence-based foods that can really support with this beyond, your lactation cookie that you can buy, the milk maker biscuits, which I've never really gravitated towards those.
Yeah. And, I think there's definitely a lot of factors that impact milk supply. I am always a big advocate of, encouraging clients to meet with a lactation specialist who can, evaluate things from that angle. Mm-hmm. From a food and nutrition perspective, low energy intake or low calorie intake is probably the biggest reason that I see, women's supply dip. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that it can be hard to eat enough postpartum based on what our needs are, and also just how busy and depleted we are. So, I don't want to make it sound like any of this is, easy breezy or, snap your fingers and it just happens. It does, take some intention, and ideally we can, simplify the strategies, but really, making sure we're eating enough, especially if you're in the postpartum period and you've started, exercising, moving your body more, that's going to increase our energy needs. So it would really make sure that we are focusing on energy intake at baseline. Outside of that, there's small amounts of data around specific, foods or nutrients that can be helpful, postpartum in terms of lactation supply. I tend to really, in general, recommend that women focus on, balanced meals. So those high quality proteins, fiber-rich starches, lots of non-starchy veggies, a lot of healthy fats, which, we need. Also iron-rich foods and iodine-rich foods. There is a product that I like based on clients' experiences, and I actually use this postpartum. There's a company called Milk Moon Herbs that makes a really great like milk supply tincture, and ultimately what it contains is nervine herbs, so herbs that are helping the nervous system.
Wow.
So helping to calm and support the nervous system, which can be really a big part of what impacts milk supply. And it contains a couple other kind of food compounds that have some decent research for supporting milk supply. I will say, again, if you're not, eating enough or supporting those foundations, none of these things are probably going to tip the scale with milk supply. But if we can support those nutrition foundations, that's where something like, the milk supply tincture that has, nervines and some, plant bioactives that can help with milk supply may be helpful.
Amazing. Oh God, I need to get myself some of that. So I feel like my nervous system needs some calming.
I mean, I know it's so hard. So, stress is everywhere, but then when you're in this postpartum period and like our stress response systems are just like, so wonky, so much is out of our control. And again, I think it's just got to focus on what we can, and ideally just like let go of what we can't.
It's so hard though. I feel like sometimes I get myself into a hole where I spiral. And I'm like, you're spiraling. I'm telling myself I'm spiraling, but I'm still spiraling. There's no stopping the spiraling. And I mean, it literally takes me removing myself from the situation, going for a walk, doing something to just kind of take me back down. But it is wild. And as much as you try to support yourself, it's, every day is just a different day. Is it your first?
Yes.
Congrats. So exciting.
Thank you. Yes. No one can prepare you, really.
No. My first is still my worst in that sense. Obviously, he's an absolute dream. Love him to pieces. But I think the jump from 0 to 1 has been the hardest jump for me to accept. For sure. Yeah,
I only have this experience, but it's crazy. It's and I'll say too, I work with women, again, preconception, pregnancy, postpartum for a living. And, there were still so many, challenges that I faced. And I think, for me in particular, I think the mindset shifts were the biggest and hardest thing for me to work on in terms of, how much changes and your capacity and bandwidth for all things changing. And I realized pretty early on that, pressure I was putting on myself in relation to, getting back to work or, doing X, Y, and Z with food that I used to do. It was really important for me to let go of that pressure and to adjust my, expectations. And I think once I was able to kind of really work through, and it's an ongoing thing, I'll be honest, work through some of those mindset shifts, I think that's where things felt a lot better for me in terms of, letting go of some of the pressure.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. I think it took me to well after my second to realize that. I mean, a long time. I think my little girl was, I would say, close to 20 months until I really, really probably started to take the pressure off myself a bit. But God, it was wild. It was wild. But finishing off today, we always ask our guests to share one tip and one product. So if you were to leave us with 2 nuggets of information, what would they be?
One tip, one product. So for a tip, and kind of thinking about our postpartum, women here, I think I would really just encourage women to, this I guess is a 2-part tip, but, to reiterate, to one, focus on nourishment and, do not beat yourself up, really kind of shifting and working towards a mindset that is rooted in abundance and support and nourishment and kindness throughout this postpartum period. And kind of the other part of it that we've talked about being letting go of the idea that we need to be perfect with nutrition, with our lifestyle. We don't need to be perfect in order to, see really positive results with supporting our body. In terms of a product, I'll give a shout out to my favorite prenatal product, which, might be helpful for women. One of my go-to top prenatal recommendations is through Fullwell Fertility. Okay. The product was actually created by a dietitian colleague who has kind of, dedicated her career to studying, prenatal, postpartum nutrition, and just a very high quality product. And if anyone's looking for a great prenatal, that would definitely be one to check out.
I love this. Thank you. I will link all of this information in the show notes. And Jillian, for anyone who wants to reach out, find you, say hi, where can they find you?
Yes. So you can find me over on Instagram. I'm always there kind of, sharing nutrition, lifestyle tips in relation to women's health. My handle is at Jillian Greaves RD. You can also check out my website, which is just jilliangreaves.com. I have all sorts of, fun free resources and guides there in terms of articles, recipes, and, information about kind of what we do and, how you can get some support if that's of interest.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been so lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much for ending my day on a high. It's been great. I know what I'm going to be going to have for my dinner tonight.
I love
some
that.
Nutrient-dense food and some protein. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. But thank you so much for your time. It's been so great. And hopefully we'll be speaking to you again very, very soon.
Thank you. This has been so much fun. Really appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Okay, wait there. Let me press...